Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It's strange how a single evening can change the rhythm of an entire life. That night wasn't supposed to be special. It was quiet, calm, just another late evening when the rain gently tapped against the windows, and the house felt too big, too empty. I remember standing by the kitchen counter, the soft light from the stove reflecting on the floor, when he walked in, my stepson, Ethan. 23, polite, distant most days, but lately, there was something different in the way he looked at me. We had always kept our distance, not out of coldness, but respect. He had his own life, his friends, his world. But that night, for reasons I still can't fully explain, our worlds slowly began to overlap. Maybe it was the quiet, or maybe it was how both of us were tired of pretending everything was fine after so many lonely nights in that house. He had just returned from work, his hair wet from the rain, his voice low when he said, "You're still awake?" Something about the way he said it made me pause, made my heart race in a way I couldn't ignore. I poured him some coffee, trying to keep things light, but the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, full of words we weren't saying. Every laugh, every glance felt charged. We talked about nothing and everything: movies, memories, even the things we'd both lost along the way. The more he spoke, the more I realized how much I had missed just being seen. And for the first time, I saw him not just as my stepson, but as someone who had grown, someone who carried kindness and pain in equal measure. As the clock ticked past midnight, I remember feeling torn. I knew where the line was, the invisible boundary I had promised myself never to cross. But when he reached over to hand me a blanket and his fingers brushed against mine, it was like time stopped. There was warmth, tension, and something deeper, something neither of us wanted to name. I wish I could say I walked away, that I turned off the lights, said goodnight, and let things stay the way they were. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed. And that choice, that small, silent decision, would change everything that followed. The days that followed felt strangely heavy, as if the air inside the house carried a quiet secret neither of us dared to mention. Nothing had really happened that night, not in the way people might assume, yet something had shifted. There was a closeness now, something unspoken that lingered between every look, every small moment we shared. Ethan seemed different too, gentler, more thoughtful, as if he was carrying the same confusion I was. We went about our daily routines, pretending everything was normal. But I could feel it, the unspoken awareness that neither of us could shake. Sometimes, I'd find him already in the kitchen in the morning, making coffee before work. He'd smile softly, slide a cup toward me, and say good morning in that low, calm voice of his. Those simple gestures felt too warm, too deliberate, as if they meant more than they should. I told myself to stop overthinking. I reminded myself who I was and who he was. But every time I looked at him, I saw less of the boy I used to know and more of the man he had become. The distance that once defined us had disappeared, replaced by a strange comfort that both scared and intrigued me. One evening, while sorting through some old boxes in the living room, I found a picture of us from years ago, one where we were all still trying to learn how to be a family. I remember the awkward smiles, the unsure poses. Back then, everything had felt like an effort, learning to connect, to fit together in a life that was pieced from two different worlds. But now, years later, I realized how far we had come. We weren't strangers anymore. Maybe that was why this tension felt so complicated, because it came from a place of familiarity, of care. That night, he came home late again. The house was quiet, only the soft hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. I was sitting on the couch, lost in thought, when he walked in. He looked exhausted, yet his eyes softened when they met mine. "You're still up," he said, setting his keys on the table. I smiled, pretending to read the book in my lap. "Couldn't sleep," I answered. He sat across from me, and for a few seconds, neither of us said a word. The air between us felt thick, not with discomfort, but with everything we weren't saying. He leaned back, ran a hand through his hair, and quietly said, "You don't have to wait up for me every night, you know." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, wondering if he could hear how fast my heart was beating. We talked for hours after that about work, life, how strange it felt living in a house that once held so many memories. It was easy talking to him. Too easy. Every laugh felt natural, every shared silence strangely comforting. And even when I told myself to end the conversation, I found reasons to keep it going. The clock struck 2 before either of us noticed. He stood up to leave, then hesitated, just for a moment, as if debating whether to say something more. His eyes lingered on me, soft and uncertain, before he whispered a quiet goodnight. When the door to his room finally closed, I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space he'd left behind. Something inside me stirred, a mix of guilt, longing, and confusion that I couldn't explain. I don't know what scared me more, the idea of what could happen, or the thought that part of me didn't want to stop it. The following week moved in slow motion, each day blending into the next with a quiet rhythm that only deepened the tension between us. Ethan and I began spending more time together, though neither of us admitted we were doing it on purpose. He'd help me fix small things around the house, a loose shelf, a flickering light, simple, ordinary moments that somehow felt heavier than they should. Every brush of his hand, every shared glance, seemed to pull us closer to something neither of us wanted to name. Sometimes, I'd catch myself watching him when he wasn't looking the way he moved, the calmness in his expression, how much he had changed over the years. He wasn't the unsure young man I once knew. He was confident now, grounded, yet there was still a softness in him that made me feel safe. That feeling scared me. It made me question my own heart in ways I wasn't prepared for. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed just as conflicted. There were moments when he'd look at me like he wanted to say something, then stop himself. Once, when we were cooking dinner together, his hand brushed mine, and he froze not because it was awkward, but because the silence afterward said more than either of us could. I laughed it off, but inside, my thoughts were spinning. The real conflict started when my best friend, Laura, dropped by one afternoon. She noticed the shift immediately, how the atmosphere in the house felt different. She teased me lightly, asking if I had someone new in my life. I denied it, of course, but the heat in my face must have said otherwise. That night, her words replayed in my mind again and again. Maybe she had sensed something I was trying to ignore. To make things more complicated, Ethan began opening up about his own struggles, how lonely he had been since his last relationship ended, how he felt out of place even among friends. Listening to him made my heart ache. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him he wasn't alone, but I knew there were lines we shouldn't cross. Still, there was something about the honesty in his voice, the quiet vulnerability, that made it impossible to stay detached. One rainy evening, the power went out. We found ourselves sitting in the living room, the only light coming from a few candles on the table. The sound of rain against the windows filled the silence. We talked for hours about dreams, regrets, and the kind of love that feels impossible yet unforgettable. Every word drew us closer, but every silence reminded us of the walls still standing between us. I could feel the tension growing, like an invisible thread pulling tighter each day. I knew something had to give. Either we would face what was happening, or we would drift apart pretending it never existed. But deep down, I wasn't sure which one scared me more. As the days passed, even small moments felt charged. A shared laugh at breakfast, a long pause in the hallway, everything carried a quiet electricity. It was like we were both waiting for something to happen, though neither of us wanted to be the first to make it real. It was late on a Friday evening when everything seemed to come to a breaking point. The rain had returned, steady and endless, filling the quiet house with a rhythm that matched the unease in my chest. Ethan was home early for once, moving around the living room as if trying to distract himself. I could sense something was different. He wasn't his usual calm self, his eyes carried a weight I couldn't read. We had been dancing around this unspoken tension for weeks, pretending it didn't exist, pretending we didn't notice how close we'd become. But that night, the silence between us felt too heavy to ignore. I tried to busy myself with small things, folding laundry, checking the clock, pretending not to feel his gaze follow me every time I moved. Still, the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. When he spoke, his voice was low but steady. "Can I ask you something?" he said, standing by the window, the dim light from outside outlining his face. I nodded, trying to act calm, but my pulse was racing. Do you ever think about that night? His words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. I froze. It was the first time either of us had mentioned it. I wanted to say no, to dismiss it, to move past it, but the truth wouldn't come. Instead, I said softly, sometimes. That one word changed everything. The silence that followed was deafening. He turned toward me, and in his eyes, I saw the same confusion I'd been hiding, a mix of guilt, curiosity, and something deeper neither of us wanted to admit. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had narrowed down to that room, that moment, and the space between us. Every emotion we'd been avoiding seemed to surface all at once, the longing, the hesitation, the fear of what might happen if we took one step closer. He moved toward me slowly, as if testing the air, waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. My breath caught as the distance between us disappeared, and for the first time, it felt impossible to pretend anymore. The truth was there, raw, real, and terrifying. Before anything could happen, a loud crash of thunder shook the house, snapping us both back into reality. He stepped back quickly, running a hand through his hair, looking torn. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking just a little. The next morning, the house felt different, quieter, almost hollow. Ethan had already left for work, but his coffee mug was still on the counter, half-finished. I stood there staring at it for a while, my mind replaying every second from the night before. The way he had looked at me. The words we didn't say. The moment we almost crossed that invisible line again. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself that things would return to normal, but deep down, I knew something had changed. As the day went on, I couldn't focus on anything. My phone buzzed once, a message from him. "Can we talk tonight?" Simple words, yet my hands trembled as I read them. Whatever was coming, I knew it wouldn't be easy. That evening, the sky was painted in shades of gray, the air heavy with the scent of rain. When he finally came home, there was a tension in his expression that immediately put me on edge. He didn't speak right away, he just set his bag down, pacing slowly, as if searching for the right words. "There's something I need to tell you," he said finally, his tone quiet but serious. I waited, unsure what to expect. His next words hit me harder than I imagined. "I got a call today, from Dad." The room seemed to freeze. My husband, his father, had been gone for months on an overseas assignment. We hadn't heard from him in weeks. "He's coming back," Ethan continued, his eyes locked on mine. "Soon. Maybe next week." A wave of shock, guilt, and confusion rushed through me. That one sentence shattered the fragile world we'd built around silence and uncertainty. His father's return would bring everything into the light, the tension, the closeness, the questions we'd both been avoiding. Ethan sat down, his hands clasped tightly. "I thought I'd be happy," he said, his voice low. "But I'm not. I don't even know how to feel anymore." His honesty cut deep. It wasn't anger or rebellion in his tone, it was heartbreak. And I didn't know how to respond. The following days were filled with quiet tension. We avoided each other, speaking only when necessary. But pretending grew harder with every passing hour. There were moments when I'd find him watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable, like he was trying to memorize something before it was gone. Then came another unexpected twist. One afternoon, Laura, my best friend, stopped by again. She seemed uneasy, her voice hesitant as she told me she'd run into Ethan in town. "He looked distracted," she said. "He mentioned something about leaving for a while." My heart dropped. I hadn't heard anything about that. When I asked him later, he didn't deny it. "Maybe it's better if I go for a bit," he said quietly. "Before Dad comes home. Before things get harder." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. The thought of him leaving felt like losing something I never had the right to want in the first place. But deep down, I understood. Maybe space was the only way to stop everything from falling apart. That night, I lay awake listening to the rain again, the same sound that had started everything. Only this time, it felt heavier, like it carried the weight of everything left unsaid. The house felt too big, too empty, and I couldn't tell if the quiet was peace or punishment. The week passed in slow motion, each day a reminder that Ethan was leaving. His father's return was only 2 days away, and the air inside the house felt tight with everything unspoken. We tried to act normal, talking about small things like groceries and errands, but beneath every word was the same quiet ache. It was strange, knowing something was ending, even if it had never really begun. On his last night, the rain returned, just like it had at the start. I was sitting in the living room when he came in, carrying his packed bag. He didn't say much, just looked around the room as if memorizing it. "I didn't think it would be this hard," he admitted softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled faintly, trying to stay calm, though my chest felt heavy. "Sometimes doing the right thing hurts the most," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. We sat in silence for a long time, the sound of rain filling the room. Then he really looked at me, and said, "I don't regret meeting you, or any of this. I just wish things were different." His words hit deep, because they were the truth I had been avoiding. There was nothing else to say. He reached for my hand, held it for a brief moment, and then let go. That small gesture felt like goodbye and confession all at once. He turned to leave, but before he could step out the door, headlights flashed through the window, a car pulling into the driveway. My heart froze. His father was home early. Ethan and I exchanged a stunned look, neither of us moving. The door opened, and his father's voice echoed from the hallway, cheerful and unaware. "Honey? I'm back." Everything inside me shifted. I stood there frozen, caught between two worlds, the past I had lived and the mistake I almost made. Ethan quickly stepped back, his face pale but calm. "You should go," I whispered, my voice trembling. But instead, he shook his head. "No, it's okay," he said softly, his expression steady. "Maybe it's time we both stop hiding." For a moment, I thought everything would collapse. But when his father entered, smiling and tired from travel, Ethan simply walked forward and hugged him. "Welcome home, Dad," he said quietly, his voice steady though his eyes glistened with emotion. I watched them, father and son, and felt a strange peace settle inside me. It wasn't happiness, but it was closure. Later that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I found a note on the table in Ethan's handwriting. "Some feelings aren't meant to be acted on, but they still change who we are." I folded it carefully, unsure if it was an ending or a beginning. The next morning came quietly, the rain finally gone, leaving the air cool and calm. For the first time in weeks, the house felt normal again. Ethan's father was in the kitchen, making coffee and talking about his trip, unaware of the storm that had nearly broken everything before he arrived. I watched them from across the room, father and son, reunited, laughing lightly about small things. It felt like the right kind of silence this time, the kind that lets old wounds start to heal. Ethan didn't stay long after that. A few days later, he packed his things and said he wanted to move closer to the city, to start fresh, find new work, and give himself space to think. I understood completely. There was nothing left to say. When we said goodbye, it wasn't heavy or painful, just quiet. He hugged me once, briefly, and whispered, "Thank you for everything." That was all. No promises, no lingering looks, just a simple goodbye that somehow carried all the words we'd never said. In the weeks that followed, life slowly found its rhythm again. I went back to work, started visiting friends more, and even took small trips on my own. But sometimes, when the house was quiet and the rain returned, I'd still think about that chapter of my life, not with regret, but with understanding. Some stories aren't meant to be perfect. They're meant to remind us that even mistakes can teach us who we are and what we truly need. One evening, months later, I got a message from Ethan. It was short, just a photo of the city skyline at sunset and a simple line, "Doing better now. Hope you are too." I smiled when I saw it. Maybe that was how life worked. People drift apart, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally learned how to let go the right way. That night, I sat by the window, watching the rain return once more. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel heavy. It just felt real, a quiet reminder that sometimes love isn't about staying, it's about learning when to move on. Every person we meet leaves something behind, a memory, a lesson, a small piece of who we were when they knew us. Ethan left all three. What about you? Have you ever had someone walk into your life just to teach you what letting go really means? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you'd like to see what happens next, maybe a sequel where both paths cross again, let me know. Story summary. A quiet night between two lonely souls begins a chain of emotions that neither expected. When a stepmother and her grown stepson find themselves caught between love, guilt, and circumstance, they must face the truth before it destroys everything they care about. Torn between right and wrong, they learn that some connections are meant not to be lived, but remembered.